Boris Johnson this week rolled out his plan for reopening Britain. It takes the form of a four-stage plan, and each stage requires a four-test criteria to move to the next one. Stage one includes opening schools on March 8th, and by March 29th, outdoor sport and rule of six socialising will return. This stage will also include a return of childcare and health and care home visits of one. Stage two will be the reopening of hospitality, but only outdoors. Shops and hairdressers will be reopened on April the 12th. On stage three includes most social distancing rules will be relaxed, and mixing up to 30 people will be allowed no earlier than May 17th. Stage four promises an end to all legal restrictions on socialising no earlier than June the 21st. But the criteria for these stages include whether or not the vaccine rollout is continuing to be successful, and whether vaccines are bringing down hospitalizations and deaths, whether cases are not reaching emergency levels, so the NHS is not being overwhelmed, and whether new variants are not causing any unforeseen risks. So the problem with this is a typical problem that's happened throughout the pandemic, that we're being treated like school children and being spoken to in a condescending schoolmasterly tone. And the onus is completely on us. And some of these tests, particularly the one about new variants and not exasperating any more risk, these are quite open-ended. So I've designed my own four test for the government, four criteria test for the government to ensure that we are satisfied, that we are in fact seeing a return to liberty, that we can be happy that this is indeed what's being promised, a return of our liberties and the long road to freedom, as Boris Johnson said. The first should be a complete and total rescinding of the Coronavirus Act, as well as an independent review into the Public Health Act 1984, which is dedicated to dismantling all the statutes which have allowed the mass infringement of basic rights over the last 12 months. The second criteria should be a matching of funds of those spent by the government on lockdown propaganda in 2020. So the millions and millions of pounds that have been spent on creating fear and hysteria and panic and forcing people to start spying on each other, creating an atmosphere of paranoia around coronavirus. The same figure that was spent on all of that in the last year needs to be spent on unrolling all that, a kind of complete counter-propaganda campaign. And it needs to be just as relentless, 24/7, all across the news. When we start to see that, that will be one of the main criteria where we can really see a commitment from the government. The third criteria, it should be a festival of liberty in which Westminster is thrown open to the public at regular intervals, so the public can enjoy exhibitions, performances, and lectures on the history of British freedom and democracy, starting with Magna Carta and ending with lockdowns. The intuition behind that is that in the early 50s, after the war, we had the Festival of Britain, which was, a kind of way of galvanizing people to feel proud of their country again, to kind of rejuvenate the culture, not just the economy, after the war. We should also have, as the fourth criteria, on June 21st, which is when Boris Johnson says he wants a complete relaxation of all social distancing and all regulations, we should have a V-Day celebration street party in which British citizens are allowed to go to Piccadilly and Trafalgar Square, just like they were after the war, and to have a complete blowout, to have a party, to socialise, to just have fun and have no regulations, and to experience being in a big crowd again, to being a country again, being citizens again, and to affirm that there's going to be no policing, there's going to be no looking over their shoulder, and we can all just have a big party. And if the government were to commit to that, then that would be a big sign to the British people that their freedoms have been restored. And also a Queen's speech affirming these values, just like a Christmas Queen speech, would also not go amiss. So the idea behind all of these criteria is that, as Lord Sumption said in a piece in The Guardian recently, in the Telegraph, not The Guardian, he said that we live in a country where the checks and balances are internal. They're based on attitude. They're based on the presumption of liberty. They're based on a certain internal commitment that each citizen needs to have. Otherwise, our institutions become hollow shells, basically. So these criteria would be 4 key signs that the government is committed to re-establishing liberty, not just in the form of our institutions or taking away the Coronavirus Act, but in reaffirming the inherent presumed values that are required for those institutions to work. If you want to read any more about our coverage of freedoms and our return to liberty, or the proposed exit strategy by Boris Johnson, please go to Bournbrook magazine.